The Beastmen are one of the most aggressive factions in the game. They have the ability to set their sights on a target and launch assault after assault with no signs of slowing down until you take them out completely. They're a power fantasy to play as, but coming up against them can be a nightmare. So much so that you voted on the Discord, which you can join in the description, for them to be the next faction we go over how to beat. So let's waste no more time and dive into the campaign. Unlike most factions we've covered so far, the Beastmen have no shortage of campaign mechanics which make them an absolute nightmare to come up against. Let's go through these one by one and how exactly you can counter them. First of all, their default movement stance is a moving ambush, meaning they can walk right up to you, attack your army, and all of a sudden you're in an ambush battle at a huge disadvantage. This is endlessly frustrating as it can throw your entire battle plan out the window and allow your army to be taken down by a vastly inferior force. However, there are a number of things that you can do to reduce the chances of a successful ambush. When leveling up your lords, you can pick any skills that increase ambush defense chance to flat out reduce the chances of this happening and instead get yourself a fair fight. This is normally one of the best courses of action as it's flat reduction at all times, and once you have the skills, you don't really need to do anything unusual. Now, it's not foolproof because it is just a chance reduction, so there is still a chance that you can be ambushed, but it's much reduced, so less of a constant problem. When you know they're in the area, ending your turn in a settlement or in encamp stance also helps this, but it isn't the most convenient since there's not always a settlement nearby, and encamp does tend to slow you down quite a bit. It's alright to do this every now and then, but keeping up for the entire game will be just as frustrating as constant ambushes. Using heroes is another great way to scout out areas before moving into them, since they'll have a chance to spot hidden enemies, so at least you'll know what you're walking into. Once you have a bead on an enemy army, try using your hero to follow them around to prevent them sneaking up on you, and of course use any actions you can to inconvenience them. Armies are almost all the beasts have, so if you can hinder them as much as possible, you're kneecapping their faction significantly. The hidden encampment stance is also kind of an ambush, but it's more the traditional kind rather than one that they bring to you. This is much easier to counter since you just have to try not to step on their army when they're using this, and if you're making use of heroes, this should be no problem. Just scout out where you want to go ahead of time, and they should be revealed, leaving you free to walk straight past them with no risk of ambush. You can even attack them for a fair fight if you'd like, which might be a good idea since they're likely in that stance to do some recruiting, meaning chances are their army isn't at full power. Yet another stance they have is the Beast Paths, and this is just another name for an underway stance, allowing them to essentially teleport around the map regardless of terrain constraints. This is a little more nuanced to counter since chasing them directly can result in you going back and forth 1,000 times as they hop either side of an otherwise impassable mountain. Certain factions have skills which increase their chances of intercepting enemies using the underways, but this isn't always an option for everyone. The only foolproof way that works for everyone is mind games. Go into ambush stance on your side of the impassable terrain nearby to a vulnerable settlement or a weaker army, and when they hop over to attack, dive on them before they can run back. You have to create a juicy target for them to want to close in on, and then once they do, dive on them and take them out. A great thing about the Beast Paths or the underways or whatever you want to call it is that if you eliminate their army whilst they're in this stance, they will be completely eliminated with nowhere to run, so it's a great way to get rid of armies if you can do it. Yes, it is a bit of a hassle to get done, but if you can manage it, it works out great for you. As for their actual settlements, they're in the form of herdstones. These can cause you a whole lot of trouble if they create one near to where you want to settle. Once a herdstone is placed, the surrounding area will be sent into chaos with corruption and the Beastmen raising every settlement in sight. This is obviously a problem if you're in the area, as you probably don't want your settlements raising, and most factions won't enjoy this much corruption in their lands. And if yours or any other settlement does get raised, you won't be able to settle there until the herdstone is destroyed, which can be no mean feat. These things normally have some pretty beefy garrisons, as well as potentially armies being stationed there too. This makes them a real challenge to get rid of, with the one upside being the limited number of them. Early in the game, they'll only be able to place one at a time, so you can focus all of your resources on taking them down as quickly as possible. If you let them get into the late game, it'll only get harder as they place more, have more armies to defend them, and more powerful effects. The Beastmen really are a faction that starts off kind of weak before hitting power spikes that are basically straight lines upwards, so cutting them off early is essential to beating them. The good thing about herdstones is that once they're destroyed, the lands around them are cleansed relatively quickly and can be settled again immediately. Just prioritize take them out if you ever see one undefended to slow any progress the beast might be making and keep your lands free of their taint. And the last thing to know about the Beastmen when fighting them is that their units are all recruited and upkept for free. This means they can recruit as many units as they want, no matter how well they're doing in the campaign. Now obviously these will be basic units early on, but you can still fight them and take out most of their army, only for them to turn up 3 turns later with another full stack, even if they don't have a coin to their name. When you fight them, you really need to focus on taking them out for good. Not only will this stop them from coming back with more units later, it's also the majority of their faction. Take out all of their armies and you take out the faction, so wiping them out completely every single time you see them is advised to knock them out as fast as possible. Like I said, they're one of the most snowbally factions in the game, so if you can take them out before they get rolling, you'll have a much easier time of things. Speaking of rolling, the Beastmen in battle really have one main focus, and that's momentum. Their entire army is focused on moving around quickly and using that speed combined with their mass to plow through enemy armies before they even know what's coming. This makes them a hard faction to build against since they'll almost always be faster than you, making backlines feel insecure and front lines never thick enough. Everything in their roster moves quickly and hits hard, leaving little room for defense because most of the time they just don't need it. To counter them, you need to force their momentum to come to a stop and pick them apart on your terms rather than trying to keep up with their insane pace. So the first thing you need to do is absorb their charge and stop their movement. This is going to hurt no matter what you do, so all you can do is make it hurt as little as possible with the toughest units you can with some charge defense. Here I actually went with halberds instead of greatswords for the Empire because the charge defense combined with the melee defense means less damage than just having a load of armor. Once they made impact, it hurt, but not nearly as much as it could have. Then my troops could press the attack and bog them down to get them stuck in melee to protect my backline. Speaking of which, once their army was stuck in melee, you need to prioritize targets for your ranged troops. The front lines are keeping them safe, so now they need to put in work. Target the largest threats, both in terms of what they can do to your army and also their size. Large units are obviously a lot easier to hit with more missiles at once to go down faster, and one less unit is always a win. Focus fire everything you have on one unit at a time to take down targets one by one. Occasionally something might slip through your front lines like a large monster, or lord or hero. When this happens, use a lord or hero of your own to get them into melee and focus fire them down to get rid of the threat as soon as possible. Ranged troops are the most valuable thing in your army when fighting the Beastmen, so keeping them alive by taking out threats should be your #1 priority. If they try to go for a flank, use some melee infantry or cav or heroes or whatever you have to shut it down and either take them out or hold them still to get picked apart by ranged. Speaking of all this range, I'd advise plenty of armor piercing, but also some anti-large if you have it. Basically, all the major threats of the Beastmen are large, but only have medium armor, so anti-large bonus can sometimes be more beneficial than just having flat out more armor piercing damage. Don't worry about fire and arc since they're all nice big targets which should have no problem hitting even if they're standing behind your melee troops. Artillery can be done, you'll just need to be extra careful where you position them since being too close to the action can land them in hot water, and unlike ranged infantry, they can't get away very easily. Honestly, if you keep ranged units safe and focusing down at major large threats, the beasts don't really have much else to do, so will crumble pretty quickly. It's all about halting their momentum. As soon as they're forced to play at your speed, it's the beginning of the end if you can keep pumping the brakes. You can support this with spells to keep slowing them down and reducing their damage output. Funnily enough, the Lore of Beast has a great spell for this, so it's a great option for bringing to counter them. Plus, Amber Spear goes crazy against the big boys. So, if I was to build an army against the Beastmen, it goes something like this. Front lines are going to be whatever has the best defense and charge resistance. Damage is nice if an option, but defense is the priority here since they need to be able to hold back basically the entire army for as long as possible. For ranged infantry, we're bringing armor piercing and or anti-large units. Doesn't matter what fire and arc they have, they're going to be aiming for literally the biggest threats they can find and focus fire them down one at a time. In particular, focus on anything that breaks through your front lines and becomes a threat to the ranged units themselves. These guys are literally going to carry you to victory, so you must keep them alive at all costs. If you have the option, I'd also bring some cav or monsters, basically just something fast that possibly has anti-large damage and some decent melee stats. They're here to ward off any flanks that your front lines can't react to, or chase down any of those pesky skirmishers they may decide to bring. If no flanks come, then do some of your own and pile as much damage onto the wall of enemies as you can. Just be wary of too much damage coming back to them. For leadership, like I said, a spellcast with some form of slowing will go a long way. If you can take the momentum out of their units, they'll be a lot less effective, and if you can reduce their damage output, you'll buy your army a ton of time. Beast is a great choice, but work with what you have and pick whatever's the best. For Lord, I'd pick something that can get on a fast mount and is a passable fighter. Go on to intercept any units that make it into your backlines and take the aggro to give your valuable units time to escape. Obviously, you don't want your Lord to die, but better for them to take some hits and keep the literal backbone of your army safe. And that's really about it. The beasts can be quite hard to beat, but the strategy to counter them is quite simple. Is it easy to execute all the time? Of course not, but that's life. If you just stay calm and follow these steps, you'll be able to take them out no matter what. Just focus on halting their momentum and forcing them to fight you how you want to fight them, and they'll go down in no time. As long as you keep your backline safe and firing, you should win in no time flat. And that's everything you need to know to beat the Beastmen. Let me know if there's something I missed in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want to know how to beat more factions, then why not check out this video on the Ogre Kingdoms.